And that's
Could we do our first one, just me and you? Would that be possible?
yes, but
It,
there is actually no problem with the video. That in fact, when you were watching the videos that you have seen, you're not paying attention to anything about the individual other
yeah,
than the fact that his questions are good
sure.
for you.
I guess my one fear, if I'm honest, is I really want to dialogue with you. I want to be very open, and
Uh-huh.
um, I guess just that first introduction, I get a little nervous that I'll inhibit myself. Uh,
Well, let's just keep the video going and I'll talk to you a little bit and then you can relax and then it
sure.
won't matter anymore. Or if you want something that you to talk about specifically off camera, then we can turn the camera off.
Or maybe if at the end we change our
Yeah.
mind, you can just not post it. Maybe.
Then we don't post it, right?
Okay.
There's no, there, we're completely easy. But
Okay.
right now, in
Cool.
this moment, everything is still okay.
I agree with you on that one. I'm there.
All right. So, um, the position that we started talking about, we can do it this way by starting with an analogy or a story or a metaphor. And that metaphor is Western school, where you have a classroom and
Yeah.
you have a teacher and you have a bunch of students. All right. Meditation systems seem to have gotten that kind of formality where there's one main teacher and then there's a lot of volunteers around him, but they're really just students.
Yeah. Yeah.
That means then that everybody keeps looking back to that teacher rather than looking at it as a community. Now, surprisingly enough, the community starts as soon as the teacher disappears in the sense of recess. The kids can actually play together and much, if you recollect, much of what you learned and what you remember about school was not in the classroom anyway.
Sure. Sure.
All right. So from that perspective, um, what we look at in meditation retreats and places like that is that everybody's doing their own thing in their own relationship with a teacher who is so remote because there's so many people wanting something from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in Thailand, when I got to Wat Suan Mok, I found out that it was a completely different situation. And that was that it was all about relationship in the community, how each individual fit in and how he related to the teacher and how the teacher related to him.
Yeah.
Okay. And that a teacher then will spend in a fairly amount of time with one student. And then another time he'll spend quite a lot of time with another student. That in fact, Achan Po would move around the Wat, and nobody needs seemed to know where he was. To where in fact he was probably just visiting some monk out there,
Yeah. Yeah.
just passing the time of day and being friends.
Now, in my travels, despite looking, I never found that relationship with a teacher who could really just, you know,
I
take that.
know I looked all over India for it without even knowing what I was looking for. What
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
actually thought I was looking for was magic.
Yeah. I was. I never. I went. I didn't go that road, but I was looking for Dharma, and it almost feels like for me. I had a teacher recently tell me in a Zen group I sit with, when I told him a bit about my practice, and he said, you've been trying to do this all on your own. And in some ways, I kind of gave up on finding a teacher and
Hmm.
really, like the horn of the bull, just said, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to look at reality. I'm going to realize what is here. And that's incredibly lonely. Um, yeah.
In a way, yes, aloneness is lonely until you have a friend to teach you how to be alone.
Well, there that's very
And
true.
the only kind of teacher who can teach you how to be alone is someone who has mastered aloneness
Sure.
on his own
Sure.
with help. that's in fact one. It's actually for me an important sutta. It's number I think it's 112, but it may be 108 in the Majjhima Nikaya, where Ananda, immediately after the Buddha's death, was out on Dhammabat, and he ran across a Brahmin, and they got into a conversation, and the Brahmin was asking him, what's the difference between the arahats or the monks that are left and the Buddha himself, who is now dead? And Ananda pointed out that there was actually only one difference, and it's a small difference, but it's significant in the sense that the Buddha discovered the path on his own and then was able to transmit it. In fact, in the beginning, the Buddha says, hey, nobody's going to get this. Nobody's going to understand this. I might as well not even bother to teach. And then he reflected on, well, who are the people who could get this? And he thought about his teachers, most of which were dead. But going back to that point about Ananda, Ananda says, really, once you understand, or once, let us say it like this, every human being is a pile of sticks of a prepared fire that has not been started. And all it takes is just a little spark from another fire, and now you've got it going.
Sure,
But you
sure.
can rub sticks together for years and not get a fire going.
If you don't know how to handle it, it's not going to.
If you don't know how to handle it and you don't know how to do sparks and things like that, then you're not going to be able to get it going. And so, what I found at Wat Suan Mokkh was a community to where the monks actually cared about each other and cared about me as I was learning to care about them.
I just want to pause real quick and say that I'm resonating with a part of you right now where you're making me recall your own story and how when you got to Wat Suan Mokkh, I remember you saying how you felt like you were finally home, like you felt like
Mm-hmm.
you were loved, basically, right? And I, I I'm acknowledging right now, hearing you, that that is something I've wanted for a long time. To not just be looking to rub my sticks alone, but to say, where's the
Mm-hmm.
fire? Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, so in that regard, the supramundane Dhamma is not just a supramundane Dhamma. That in fact, the supramundane Dhamma can only be supramundane when it's in a community or a Sangha. That this is what the real issue of the triple gem, no doubt, with all the stuff that you've done, you've already got quite a lot of background. And so I'm going to kind of rely on the fact that you know what I'm talking about. That's what the triple gem is: the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. And yet in Western Buddhism, we don't have hardly any Buddha at all and no Sangha at all. And everybody is madly scrambling in the Dhamma, but they don't know how to rub two sticks together.
yeah.
Okay, but it's from the Sangha that nurtures the Buddha that the spark then can be transmitted.
Mhm.
Okay, and that there are many, many examples of how that operates, but it really can say, I can get it down to an expression of this. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is really big on the concept that we have a duty to the Dhamma.
Yes.
And that duty that we have to the Dhamma is pervasive. It's not just religious
No,
Buddhistic.
no, no.
It is, in fact, that we all have duties. And the clearest and most obvious example is that you have a duty to take the next breath.
Yes.
And if you
I
don't, you
was
die.
sure. I was in a conversation with I'm sorry if I'm interrupting.
No, you're not
Okay,
interrupting. This
okay.
is a dialogue. It's
Yeah,
okay.
so I was been in dialogue with a friend of mine or a teacher of mine who's a Trappist monk, and we've been talking for about 8 months. And a month or two ago, in the middle of one of our conversations, I had this what kind of insight revelation moment where I realized that as I sit here talking to my friend or talking to you right now, you and I speak, but what allows us to speak is the cosmos all functioning, allowing me to sit here and take this breath. And that in the Western mind, there's this idea of entitlement to pleasure or to entertainment, to escapism, to whatever kind of, all the while there are bees pollinating flowers, there's ocean tides churning up, coral reefs, there is the movement of planets and stars, and all of these things interdependently allow me to sit here and talk to you. And so the view that I can then sit here and just proverbially fuck off while everything allows me to be, that I do not owe something back to the Dhamma, to
Mm-hmm.
being, right? It's almost like this like late stage egoic, cancerous view of the world, that I simply can be like this little king on my hill, while my hill is supported by all of creation. And I
Uh-huh.
think that's where in my,
Precisely.
yeah, and I think that's where in my mind, when when you say that you owe something to Dhamma or to Buddha, it's not a moral code system. It's a literal aspect of reality that
Indeed.
our
Mm-hmm.
humanity is indebted to Buddha, to creation, to God in the Western mind, whatever language, doesn't matter. And
Mm-hmm.
that
How about
service,
reality or
yeah,
maybe our environment? We can
let's,
use easy language for it without having to get way out there.
well,
So,
or, and that language isn't, that language is only out there, just like Buddhism, where it becomes misconstrued. At the
mhm,
base of it, it's there's no further than just you,
mhm.
you and I speaking, and that's,
So there you are on top of your world with no duties to the environment because the environment is taking care of you, and yet there is a duty, and the
absolutely,
duty is to recognize that and to appreciate it,
yes,
because otherwise you're going to just sit there and be miserable.
yeah,
So part of our duty to the Dhamma is to see the Dhamma, to recognize the Dhamma, and to begin to appreciate it.
yeah,
And so at a kind of a deeper level then, or going in that direction, we can say now then that our duty to the Dhamma is both friendliness and honesty,
yeah,
that we need those two aspects. And that the Buddha was very, very big on each one of them. That in fact, in one sutta, the name of it, by the way, is the Half Sutta, where Ananda comes to the Buddha having just left Sariputta, where Sariputta had told Ananda that friendship is half the Dhamma,
yes, yes. and
which is
and
in
and
fact,
the and the Buddha says, don't say that, Ananda, don't say that, Ananda. The noble friendship is all of the Dhamma, right?
yeah, that's all there is just
Yeah,
the friendship.
yeah,
Exactly so.
yeah,
Well, when we do our duty to the Dhamma of being friendly with ourselves within, which is half the Dhamma, and then
yeah,
friendly with the rest of the environment on the outside, then we're doing our duty to the Dhamma, and we get the benefits or the fruits of the labors of doing our duty to the Dhamma. And if we don't do the duty to the Dhamma, that means we're not friends with ourselves on the inside, and we're not friends with ourselves with the environment that we're in, including all the people in it.
sure,
And we wind up being miserable because we're not doing our duty to the Dhamma.
yeah,
That's a kind of death and a kind of prison.
yeah. It's suffering.
And exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So we can now say that then our duty to the Dhamma of being friendly and honest, that is what Sangha is really all about. Now, the word Sangha to the Western mind merely means, oh, it's all those monks in the Wat.
yeah.
And they call that organization a Sangha. To where no, that's actually just an example of
So
Sangha if it's working.
for the last maybe 2 years of my practice, 3 years or so, when I bow to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, I've begun to think of Sangha actually in everything. Um, even in the neighbor that I don't know, and realizing that all of these things allow me to practice.
Hmm.
That all, like, if I can be wise enough, everything is teaching me. Um,
Hmm. Well, you could then go so far as to say that the Buddha is that which you're sparking from within, And the Sangha is the
Mm.
environment that you're living in, and the Dhamma is the relationship between the Buddha and the Sangha.
That's that's beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And then
um,
you have the internal, external, and that mediation between the two, which is the kind of pathway of Dhamma or Tao.
so in the Western mentality, the language that you would have is that everybody who is getting interested deeply in the Dhamma, they want to become a meditation teacher. Okay. And I began to understand a long time ago that meditation was not what needed to be taught,
Mm.
but it was Dhamma that needed to be taught. But in recent years, and especially most recently in the past couple of years, I began to understand that no, what really needs to be taught is Sangha, because that's what Western Buddhism is missing. That in fact, Western Buddhism is bought into the Western business model,
Mm.
and it's capitalistic. And in that regard, it's almost like dragging the Dhamma into the marketplace and hawking it off for sale.
I can definitely see that, especially. I mean, I have had the privilege of. I do know some good sanghas around here. I sat meditation this morning with one, and actually evening with another one. But I think that the Western mind, um, there is this foolish individualism going on, and
Hmm.
and almost this kind of individualism or persona approach to everything, like you say, where like we view everything as consumption based, even the Dhamma, even Buddha, right? It's very easy to become a Buddhist as another kind of what possession or identity, rather than, like you say, the West is kind of missing that concept, like, or the experience of Buddha,
Right.
experience of
Exactly.
the Dhamma. Yeah, yeah.
You see, when
And
the
I'm guilty of that too. I'm sorry. It's just
right, no problem,
when I
no
when I
problem. The When the Buddha Dhamma spread in Asia, it always spread with a small group of monks who would go from place to place, and they carried the Sangha and the Dhamma and the Buddha with them. But Western Buddhism didn't come to the West that way for Western people. That in fact there are huge numbers of the various Asian communities that are now in the West that they brought the thing with them, but the Westerners don't even know that the Asians already know how to do this. Kind of a chauvinistic kind of thing that, oh, I want Buddhism. I'm going to get Buddhism from a Westerner who speaks my language and writes books and things like that, or go to retreat when much cleaner Buddhism is available in the Asian community because they are brought over to build their temples. They have brought good monks. They know what a good monk is. That's one of the things that I began to understand about the Thai people and by inference also the Laotian people, which I've been quite a lot about, is they're not stupid. They know what a good monk is. All right. And so if they know what a good monk is, the good monks also know what a good monk is, and everything is working that way. And so the monks who are new and want to come out of Asia to the United States for this, that, or the other reason, the Asian people are not going to spend the time and the money and the visa and all of that to bring him over. No, they're going to go after the old dude who's sitting there happily and doesn't care about coming to America at all. And he's the one they want to coax into bringing. Okay, so in that regard, we have a number of very, very beautiful, high quality people who are really worth getting to know in the United States, and the Westerners are not even associating with them, they're associating with each other.
sure, sure. Or reading commentary of commentary of commentary rather than going to sutta.
Hmm. Or a better way of saying it, actually, that's a very highfalutin word. Why don't we say it this way? Opinions about opinions
Yeah,
about
yeah,
opinions about
yes,
opinions.
yeah, 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 yeah.
um, and so um, this is what we're working on, is to get a community going, to get people who uh, so many students would come and says, I don't have anyone to practice with. I'm so glad you're on the internet, Dhammarato, so that I can spend time with you, at least with someone. And I says, hey, you guys can go off together and spend Dhamma time together.
Mhm.
That we need to build some Sangha to where everybody's in the community and everybody is got everybody else's best interest
Yeah.
in mind.
Yeah.
And so this is where it really begins to gain some real solidity, in the sense that the real supramundane Dhamma of the Buddha can only be, let us say, protected and closed within a Sangha, and that is encased. Then that Sangha is encased as a triple gem inside a very, very beautiful, ornate box. And that beautiful, ornate box now is what we'll call Buddhism.
Sure.
But the real issues about that ornate box, and you can see so many teachers that are selling that box as
Yeah.
how beautiful it is and all of that, but they're missing some of the most important, deeper qualities of
What's
it.
inside of it. Yeah.
Uh-huh. That in fact, you can't sell friendship. That's one thing that cannot be sold. The friendship cannot be bought and sold. That there are a whole lot of rich people that have a whole lot of hangers-on, gold diggers, and whatnot like that. But everybody's in it for what they can get out of it, rather than in it for the community.
Mhm.
That one way of saying it, in fact, that if you have an organization that has friendship but no honesty, it's going to wind up being a mob.
Sure. Sure.
If you have honesty but no friendship, you're going to have a war. But if you have both honesty and friendship, then that community is going to be internally honest with itself while protecting itself from the outside.
Sure.
And that's basically how the Sangha operates. That there's an awful lot of truth and wisdom and pointing fingers at one another happily so that we can gain our own internal freedom. But if a monk misbehaves within the Sangha, then the other monks doesn't, for instance, want his parents to know, because his parents will have figured they've lost face, and they'll go take their young son out of the monkhood, and he could easily be rehabilitated. And so it better not to spread the dirty laundry unless there's a reason for it. And the one main thing that would be a reason for making things open would be what is called a Sangha decessive. When someone's actually trying to break up the Sangha, that becomes public.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But other than that, we take care of one another happily,
And your point
rather
about
than blaming each other and competing with each other.
and your comment a few seconds ago about the rehabilitation is the point to the fact that we are healed in community ultimately, and that
Hmm.
Sangha is kind of the rectifying force of the individual's path towards awakening.
Hmm.
So rather than
It's the mirror, the
yeah,
reflection,
yeah,
and the mirror
or
is a clean mirror, and it gives
yes,
good reflection.
yeah,
That's the honesty. Uh-huh.
but when what and maybe in the West this is another thing we don't seem to do or sometimes don't do, is that when the reflection is not pretty, it's easy to kind of throw somebody under the bus. I mean, just look at our news cycles. I mean, I don't follow them too closely, but so often it's filled with this public figure ashamed and one after another. But there's no real
Hmm.
talk about rehabilitation of individuals. It's
Right. Well,
it's
look at prisons. Prisons are not designed for rehabilitation, they're
no,
designed for punishment.
no, yeah,
Well, what about the ruler on the child's hand? Is that ruler that's going to be slapping that child's hand? Is that for punishment or rehabilitation?
yeah, yeah.
How about the dunce? I mean, I don't know what they do in schools nowadays. I was in school a long time ago when they still had rulers.
Yeah.
And they'd hold your hand out like that, or a paddle or something like that. And the answer is that those things are merely for revenge
Yeah.
and blame, and have nothing to do with either friendship or rehabilitation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the Sangha is all about rehabilitating each other until we're cleaning up our act.
Which again makes complete sense, because the Sangha is the place where we are not we are not awakened yet, and that Sangha is there to help us move forward. So it's inevitable that obscurations will come, that will come up to the surface. I know from
Exactly so.
yeah.
So
Well,
if you are in a, let us say in a wat where you have a few noble monks, then that nobility is going to rub off on other people just
sure,
by association. That in fact, when one person gets freaked out and then another person gets freaked out and then everybody gets freaked out, that's typical. That's in fact MSNBC and Fox News.
yeah,
But if someone gets freaked out and another person sees that freak out, but he says, wait a minute, there's no reason for you to freak out. Or maybe several people get freaked out, but a few of them don't, then everybody can become unfreaked out simply because, uh, let us say, there was not enough freak out energy
sure,
amassed
yeah,
to overcome the happy joy of the nobles.
yeah, yeah,
All right. So what we're actually talking about here that we can put into an expression that we call guilt by association, right? That in fact, if you, we know for sure about the guilt of by association and wrongdoing. It's very easy to understand that if you hang out in the bar for hours and hours every day, the more likely is that you're going to be drinking alcohol than if you weren't in the bar.
sure,
Right? And that if you're associating with alcoholics, the more likelihood is that you're going to become an alcoholic.
yeah,
And if you continue to associate with alcoholics, you will begin or you will continue to drink. This is exactly what AA is based upon, is that when people start Alcoholics Anonymous, the very first step is that they have to stop associating with the old friends who were drinking.
yeah,
But we can see this in many things also, that when a young man joins the military, he doesn't do it during the day and sleep at home with his parents at night. No, they want him all the time. He's
yeah,
going to be completely immersed into the military.
sure,
Um, and other things like this. So when you are being associated with noble, high class people, their noble, high classness will rub off, just like the alcoholic will rub off.
sure, sure,
So whatever you associate with will be affecting you. This is actually one of the aspects of Sangha. And that when people are friendly with you, you'll be friendly back with them. And when people are honest and friendly with you, and not just honest, but honest with friendliness,
sure.
then you will be honest and friendly back with them.
It waters that same seed inside of you.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And
And
and it
so,
just if you go back to that earlier example of prison, for example, most people in prison, their early childhood was filled with suffering, with pain, with abuse, and it just the karma of that just unfolds. Um,
mhm.
yeah,
And in that regard, we can say that karma or that karma is not something magical in the air, but
no,
it is repetition of behavior and repetition of feelings. It's the
I mean,
action and reaction and reaction and reaction and
sure,
acting
it's
and reacting the same way to new stimulus
in
that
a
will
way,
do it.
at least in my current understanding, karma is kind of a manifestation of dependent origination. It's the movement of cause and effect, basically on a mass scale, or interdependence as well. Um, no, not some magical ethereal thing, but
Hmm.
very literal teaching. Karma is a very literal thing, and unavoidable. It's there. Yeah,
Well, that's going back then to that concept that we had about the duty to the Dhamma.
yeah,
And a lot of action is not duty to the Dhamma. And because of that, we suffer the consequences of it. But we're in that habit of doing that action. And so we continue to act and react the same old way,
yeah,
getting the same old unsatisfying results.
yeah. I know nothing about that.
And so this is what the whole thing about it is: change. Can you change?
Yeah,
If you think you can change. And in fact, um, here's an example that's really kind of profound, and that is that I know old senior monks that are absolutely marvelous human beings, the kind of guys you'd really want to live with and spend your time with. Never meditated a day in his life. Doesn't even think that it's part of the path. And why is that? Is because he became a monk. Never mind why he became a monk, but he became a monk, possibly with the idea of not staying long, but then he sort of to fall in and fit in. And because he has remained around other nobles, he has, as he grew up in the Sangha, spending years with the only role models and only examples he had was of high quality people, he began to pick up those things on his own without having to work really hard at doing it.
sure, sure. And again, another what reason why the Sangha, where in the normal world you're bombarded with so many stimulus that are, often very
Unwholesome,
otherwise. Yeah, 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 yeah. Where in the Sangha, if you're in a community of people who are aware,
where
it's
you're constantly being bombarded from the outside with the wholesome that kind of
yeah,
leaks in. Because
yeah,
in fact, that's how we got so unwholesome in the first place, is because in our childhood we were bombarded with a lot of unwholesome stuff. That,
sure.
as you say, that people who wind up in prison had an extra duty dose of it.
Yeah,
And a way of looking at that is that, for instance, if a child is raised in a household that is violence, that if brothers or sisters or husband and wives or adults beating children, but if there's violence in the house, then when that child grows up, more than likely his environment will be violent.
yeah, yeah,
If there was a lot of alcohol use in a house, then that child will grow up either a lush, an alcoholic, or a teetotaler who is adamant against it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so this is how it is that we're raised. That if you're raised in a prison, you'll probably grow up living in one someday. But we can change.
Yeah.
And that's the important part, is that your past in a way is only relevant when you continue to repeat it. But when you stop repeating the past and start living in this present moment and doing the things and the duties of this present moment rather than the duties of the past, you wind up being in a different state of mind. And this is amazing and an important point. Is that young man that we talked about that never meditated, but he just maintained and stayed with the monkhood because he knew that it was valuable for him to do that, that he was better off there, and that he was getting an environment that was much more wholesome for him than if he had quit the monkhood and gone to join the mob or something.
Mhm.
Right? Okay. So he knew then that staying in the Sangha was going to have a marvelous effect upon him. He knew that he would change. Okay, that's an important point. That's in fact the key ingredient. This is the first fetter. This is the big issue. Is does the individual have the attitude of whether they can change? Can they get out of their stuff or not?
What is this referring to? Faith? Is this
Well, no, it's
the
actually
belief?
in the Pali, or the Pali translation, we refer to it as personality view.
Okay.
And this is where everything to do with the way society is training us. And let me give you some examples of what I mean by that. These are just one of, or several of many examples. Within Christianity, they have the teaching that only God is good. Who are you to be good? That you're broken merchandise,
Yeah.
that you're original sin, and that you can't save yourself from your sin. that you have to get help from it. You have to have a plastic Jesus to put on the dashboard of your truck, or you're going to wreck your truck,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
But it's going to be the plastic Jesus that keeps you from wrecking the car.
Yeah.
This is the teaching of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
You can't change, and you can see how that's deeper in our society, and in the depths of the society. You hear it in leopards can't change their spots. The fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. Boys will be boys.
It's almost a robbery of the soul, you know.
Hmm.
I mean,
That's exactly right. The soul is a permanent, everlasting thing.
well, I mean, maybe this is mixing languages, but what I meant more so, it's a robbery of Buddha nature, if you will, but to give people the conception of reality that I mean that you're beholden to a plastic Jesus, right? I mean that's and I would go and argue that, I mean, I'm not a Christian or Catholic, but as having had a long dialogue with a Trappist monk now, I don't think that's what was ever really meant, right? That's that just like Buddhism gets misconstrued. I think a lot of these teachings become very cancerous and
Yes.
destructive.
Perhaps it may be fruitful at a future time for us to go into the differences between what Jesus said and what Christianity has become,
Sure.
because that is exactly what's happened with Buddhism, but
Well,
not nearly as complete a transformation.
yeah, but Buddhism definitely, as far as I understand too, still has a core that's much stronger. But I've heard people say that the Buddha was a flying god, or that the Buddha was a 40-foot tall golden man. You know, madness, right?
Yeah, exactly the same kind of stories you hear about Jesus.
Yeah. But when the Buddha explicitly says, you know, I am a man.
I
I
would
am.
go I would go so far as to say much of the really heavy duty magic that happened for the Buddha happened after the people who were already interested in Buddhism in their culture were introduced to Christianity and what the Christians were saying about their
Yeah,
big plastic Jesus, and they would come up with, well, our Buddha's as big as your big
sure,
plastic Jesus.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And so magic is matched with magic for
I,
ordinary people.
yeah, the magic thing has never been something I've been drawn to. I was never into the cities when I was in India. I was not looking for the, you know, I really wanted to come to closer to reality, I guess.
Guess what? I am really, really big on the cities.
Okay, okay.
Mostly, as a side point, the Pali word is not city, it's actually iti or
Hmm.
itia. Itia pada is the foundations of power. There is real power in the Dhamma.
I I've had moments of experiencing things that I would be remiss to say are just average normal
Uh-huh.
experiences. I meant more so the idea of, well, again, maybe who knows, but
Mm.
when I was studying yoga, they talk about the ability to levitate or the ability to um, I've
Yeah,
not
all you have to do is feel really light, and there you are, you're light.
but
I'm levitating right now. But it's a different kind of power.
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that it's the ordinary mind or the low class mind that misunderstand these metaphors
Yes.
as physical reality. And then they get completely disappointed because basically there's a mistake that we make, and that mistake is that I am actually not able to feel the way that I want to feel because I couldn't do that when I was a child. I felt according to the way the circumstances required me to feel. So if I'm a little child put in a room all by myself at night, then that sets me up to be fearful because I want the comfort of being in mommy's bed, but daddy doesn't want me in mommy's bed. He wants me in my own room, right? And so I'm being rejected already. And so you can hear that starting when we're really little that we begin to believe that the environment is in control of our feelings.
Sure, sure.
So we do things like buying goods to make us feel good. You've heard about people shopping till they drop, or that we
Sure.
go for hobbies or things like that to give us pleasure.
Yeah.
People go to sports events because they get a big thrill out of the football players who make the touchdown.
We lose the connection to our own capacity to
Feel
moderate our mind. Yeah.
exactly that, in
I,
fact, we are in charge of our own feelings anyway.
yes, and
But
you can
it's
see that, where, for example, two children or two people, and like one child goes to the dark room and is upset that they're not in their mother's bed, and another kid goes to their room alone and thinks about Star Wars.
mhm,
Kid think about Star Wars is happy. Kid think about his mother is sad, and so it's not the room, it's the mind. It's the mind that
it's the
is
mind.
sure. I want to back like just 1 second before too, where I think another one of the things that is commonly done in modern times is we devalue the present moment without realizing the sacredness in the present moment. And so we look forward to some kind of magical, milk and honey day or place without realizing, as again, as Thich Nhat Hanh, who's just passed, said so beautifully, the miracle of mindfulness is now. Like the Buddha land is now. Or as Dogen said, right? You are already the Buddha. You
Mhm.
just don't remember. Dogen in Japan. Um,
Yes, that actually is kind of an important point, because most people start the practice of meditation because they want something. They are dissatisfied. They can see some dukkha.
sure, sure.
Okay. And that there's actually several ways to do it, but the important point to recognize that you can be at the absolute top. You can be at the pinnacle. Example of that was the Buddha. When he was 29, he was the prince. He was an elephant trainer. He was a marksman. He had studied the Vedas. He was the best dude in the area. He even had his own all-girl band.
Yeah, oh yeah, he had it all.
Okay. He had it all, and he was still dissatisfied.
Sure.
The other example is the alcoholic that hits rock bottom before he finally figures out that he's dissatisfied. He's got to do something new.
Yeah.
And so there, you can be at either end of that continuum of the dukkha. The question is when and where are you going to wake up to the dukkha?
Sure.
Some of us have to climb to the absolute pinnacle and be in the best, very best of shape. And then we realize that, hey, this is a bunch of crap.
And
Or
it's
we can
still,
go to the rock bottom before we can say, hey, this is a bunch of crap.
yeah. And I think that points back to the very beginning of the conversation, the truth of Dhamma, the truth
Hmm.
that, even if you are in that hedonistic state and have everything, or if you're at the very rock bottom, there's this fundamental dissatisfaction, because humanity is not simply the persona we project it to be. Humanity is
Oh,
part of something immeasurable, and that desire, that suffering, you could say, is man's, as Carl Jung said, man's search for meaning, right? It's the
hmm.
soul, or the Buddha nature, knowing that something is missing. That pain is a
Precise.
gift. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So we kind of see that there's a built-in longing, or there a built-in emptiness that we have. That's what caused us to go off into things that allowed us to become the very top of the world or to hit rock bottom. But the mistake that we make is that we think that it's the rock that we bottomed that caused our suffering.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's the basic turning
That's
around, is that First Noble Truth of there is dukkha.
you could
Because a
say.
lot of,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Well, you just gave me an image. Like, if you think of it in terms of a linear scale, you start at that middle point with the Dhamma, awake, a child, in that arm of awareness. And the moment you begin either climbing, craving, or aversion, right? clinging or
Mm-hmm.
aversion. So, but if you want to use that language, but you're going up to the top of that scale, to the top or to the bottom as an alcoholic. The suffering began the moment you started going away. It was not the bottoming out or the top. It was the very moment that that being itself started relating to reality in a disharmonious way, and
Uh-huh.
that perpetuates that pull. And like you said, you think it's the rock. I hit the rock, and the rock hurt me, but the rock was not the gravity pulling you. It was that disunion
Mm-hmm.
propelling. And just the rock, you can't go further than the rock, basically. But the rock wasn't there. Yeah.
Guess what? No, I don't think there is a bottom to
Oh, sure.
it.
Yeah. Well, clearly, you can go pretty fucking low.
Yeah,
Like
people
that
can
shit.
go really, really fucking low and still
Yeah.
not learn anything, and they've
I
only
mean,
got one place to go from there, and that is even more downhill.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ah, yes. So this is the whole point, though, is that most of them have the quality of, but that's who I am, and I can't change. I
And
need help. I need an AA. I need a religion. I need a guru. I need a psychologist. I need a pill. I need, which is just more of the same old thing that they were into in the first place.
which would, oh God, that's great. That's great. It's a reattribution of the same fundamental problem. I'm
Um,
looking for this to solve that. Now I'll go there. But you're also making me think of the Dhamma itself, of the Eightfold Path, the very first, the right view, a right understanding. And if you have that flawed view, internal and external, you'll always be kind of chaotically smashing around. And like
hmm
you say, to realize that you can change. I keep coming back to Thich Nhat Hanh just with everything that's going on recently, but if I view myself from the Western persona as this man with this little history, I'm trapped into this story, this narrative. But the moment you have that opening and realizing that what you are is not just this little story, there's this huge leadway to then change
hmm
course. The the
Exactly.
the self, and again, it's one of those kind of often said, maybe not always understood, but kill the ego. If you're defined into reality from that very narrow prism and prison, you can't change course. You need, like you said, to find something else because there's nowhere to move. But
hmm
those boundaries are yeah.
Well, so then maybe we can say it this way that the major awakening, the first thing that someone has to wake up to is not the first noble truth
That I can
that
change.
dukkha does exist, but that because many people think that it's life itself that sucks. I mean,
No.
that was a bumper sticker in the 1980s. Life sucks and then you die. And that's basically the atheist position is that life sucks and Christians are wrong trying to find something to suck on.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. But when we recognize, no, the second noble truth, actually the cause of suffering is that we're sucking. That
Yes.
life sucks because we're sucking on
Yeah.
something. And if
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
would stop sucking, then life wouldn't suck.
Yeah. The fun being itself is not the problem. It's our relationship to being.
hmm
Yeah.
Right, that we want things, that we have greed. And by the way, you've heard like moba loha dosa, greed, ill will, and delusion are the three elements of the second noble truth. But it's good to understand that it's like electricity, positive and negative, that it doesn't matter which direction the electrons go. Do the electrons go from positive to negative or negative to positive? The answer to that is it doesn't matter. It's shocking in both directions, right? So if I want something and want to get it, then I'm dissatisfied because I don't have it. But if I have something that I'm dissatisfied with, then I want to get rid of it. So it doesn't matter whether it's greed or ill will, it's the same feeling of wanting or longing to either to get or to remove. And when we don't see that connection, that's ignorance. The ignorance is that basically it's
Would
delusional.
would you back that up again? Just say that last part again.
Okay, that when we do not see that
No.
greed and ill will are the same thing. All right. Here's an example of that. You can see, you've seen people do this. I remember an uncle that had a quarter, and he would take that quarter and balance it and then hit it, and it would spin.
Sure.
And while it's spinning, we cannot see the fact that it's got two faces on it. It's only when the coin slows down and then lands, we can begin to see that, oh, that coin's got two faces. It's got a face of heads and a face of tails,
Mhm.
right? That's the second noble truth. Think of that second noble truth for most people, that it's just a spinning coin and they don't know
Okay.
that greed and ill will are the same thing.
You're saying, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that without the awareness or the kind of penetration of insight, we look around the world and our suffering and we say, the world, that bumper sticker, life sucks and you're dead. And we
Hmm.
don't realize that it's actually made up of this faceted, these conditions that we are causing, that are causing the suffering. And so, is that kind
Hmm.
of what you're saying? It's because
Exactly.
life is almost going so quickly, and our relation to it so unaware, that we just think that this is all there is. You know,
Right.
80 years in a graveyard, basically, and everything between. And if you view it that way, it makes sense to escape. Hedonism
Hmm.
makes sense. If it's all fucking misery and no way out, then what are you going to do? But if you're saying, if you slow down that quarter, you then can say, oh, wait a minute, these qualities, as the Buddha taught, these aspects create the first suffering, dukkha,
Hmm.
and I can change that. I can do something differently. I can relate differently. I can act differently.
Yes,
Yeah.
that in fact we can bring that spinning quarter to a stop, as it were, and rest for a minute.
Yeah.
Or we can think of the spinning mind. We can
Yeah.
let that come to a rest
Sure.
and take a breath and relax in the moment. And that then would be the third noble truth. Now, a lot of people think, oh, the third noble truth is a one time event. It's either you never have it and then something pops and then you always have it. That's the basic idea of enlightenment for most people.
Yeah.
It's either dead or alive,
I've had some
rather
pretty
than,
powerful moments, and I've definitely fallen away.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
But the real point is that you can be free from suffering when you stop suffering. You can be free from sticking yourself with a needle. All you have to do is stop sticking yourself with a needle.
It's easier said than done.
It's actually easier done than said.
And it's actually interesting, just to notice that my mind, I agree with you. I do agree with you, Dhammarato, and I hear you. But my mind wants to defend that it's difficult to do. My consciousness wants to say,
Well,
no,
that's
no, no.
just an old habit.
Well, that's what I'm
You're
trying to
just
say.
repeating. You're just repeating an old habit,
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm just pointing it out. Like, wait, look at that. Look
which
at
is
that.
and you're in the habit of sticking yourself with that particular needle. That
But
this is
but
hard.
but to point it out though, like that that is a very interesting, you know, why argue that? Why argue that it's hard to stop? Why not just say, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
We say it's hard to stop because we have the basic attitude of a victim or a failure.
yeah,
We start off that way as a child. Every child is completely dependent upon his environment. If his mother doesn't care for him and nurture him, that child will die.
yeah, yeah,
And we have that built right into our genes. Okay. But we misunderstand it and we uh, get a sense of a feeling of separation from our family at the time when mommy stops her nurturing and puts us in school and tells us, okay, when you were 2 and 3, it was okay for you to play, but now you got to do your ABCs. Now you got to do your homework. Now you got to perform. You got to do what you're told to do. to go along to get along. In other words, the child has to become socialized.
Yep.
All right. And for every one of us, it is a painful, traumatic experience that almost no one ever gets over. That's the real post-traumatic stress disorder, is the stressfulness that we went through by being a child
Sure.
raised in the society that we're in.
And having the animal instinct beat out of us.
Mm.
I know. I know.
Actually, worse than that, no, the animal instinct is not beat out of us. The animal instinct is burdened down.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. I
That
know.
is loaded down with work to do. That, in fact,
Yes.
this is what the Buddha talks about when in the four woeful states that no doubt you've heard about, the Asuras and the Pretas, the hungry ghost, and one of them is the woeful animal.
Mhm.
Well, that's the one that Westerners are most commonly in, that woeful state of being an animal. And what that is going along to get along, doing what you're told to do, kind of expecting a reward, but the reward is always off into the future. You don't get the cookie now.
Sure. Sure. I
Okay.
I I, I was.
Delayed gratification is, in fact, that animal state, and that we go along to get along instinctually. So, in fact, our instincts are used against us.
Yes. And what I meant by the animal actually was more of a like a reverence for the animal. Friedrich Nietzsche, I believe, says the divine animal, not in a kind of derogatory, as Western mind often. The animal is kind of condemned, but the animal that is sacred, the animal that is in union with existence, is kind of.
The animal, the animal that is alive.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what's
exactly,
sacred, is being
exactly,
alive.
exactly. The animal that feels the dew on the grass on a bare foot and feels the visceral joy of a single step.
Consciously alive.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what it's all about. So this is what we're, in fact, we're waking back into, is that feeling of awe, of aliveness that we had when we were little children, when we
yeah.
were nurtured and allowed to experience that, instead of living a life of a dumb animal that's been put to work so that the
Yes,
animal doesn't have a chance.
yes,
Okay, so the example would be, here you have a young pony that is in a pasture, and that pasture has all kinds of interesting different flowers. It's got some milkweed, and it's got some hard grass, and it's got some delicious grass. But just all kinds of stuff in that whole pasture area. And then, without him knowing it, the farmer puts a harness on that horse and makes that poor horse pull a plow, and he plows up his own pasture. And then the horse does not get the benefit of the fruit of the plowing work that he's done, because the farmer plants the food the farmer wants and the horse is left with hay.
mm, yeah,
How many of us live that life?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
All right. And that's what we mean by being the dumb animal. We're hooked up to a plow and told, if you don't work, you don't eat.
yeah, yeah.
But you were pulled
And,
out of your paradise in order to be told that.
and you will get your 2 weeks off of vacation a year, and
Exactly.
you can have your beer every night. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yes, that's it. And so we are raised that way, and so it's very easy for us then to give ourselves the recurring thought of, you don't work, you don't eat. And so one student said that he was having a really, really nice time practicing Anapanasati, and then his cell phone pops up with an SMS message from his boss saying that, all because of recently COVID has started up again, we're stopping work. Stay home. Don't come in, but like that. And immediately he begins to have the feeling of, oh no, what's to become of me? Oh, I'm losing my job. But a better thing to say would be, whoopee, another day off. So why is it that we torture ourselves with the possibility of things going bad? This is about an example, or the phrase that is used is whataboutism.
Mhm.
When we say, "Oh, well, I can sit here and be happy," but what happens if the house gets on fire? Shouldn't I be in there making sure that the house is not? Well, the house is not on fire. Oh, but the house is on fire inside the mind, right? This is what possibly could go wrong with your life, and how many people are going around trying to make sure that nothing goes wrong in their life. These people are actually, when they're caught by the psychologists, are put in the prison called obsessive compulsive disorder.
Mhm.
Hmm. So um, here we are in this Four Noble Truths of understanding that it is, in fact, our delusion about how things really are that prevents us from being okay in this particular moment. Why do we have to have dukkha or dissatisfaction when we can have satisfaction? And when we understand that we can have it, but that we have been so practicing for so long dissatisfaction that
Mhm.
seems to be the side of the coin that will fall. So that we always kind of wind up with tails, but if we're more careful, we can have the head anyway. All right, and so this is where the Eightfold Noble Path comes in, and that is the actual practice that will wind us up in the third noble truth instead of winding us up in the first noble truth
Yeah. Yeah.
and not knowing how we got there.
Yeah.
And so this is what the Eightfold Noble Path is really all about. Now, one of the things that you mentioned at one time was about right view, and I'd like to point this out, that in the suttas, wrong view is a world view. Okay, and basically that worldview is that I can get away with it.
Mm.
But underlying that
Yeah.
is that I want a bunch of crap, and I'm going to go get that bunch of crap, and I can get away with getting that bunch of crap.
When you say get away with what?
Harming people.
Yeah.
You can
Okay.
get away with taking things that are not given,
Or lying or
lying,
yeah.
right. That in fact that's the whole show
Bas
is that
basically
there
that
is no
I can
retribution. There
I
is
can
no big karma machine in the sky watching me. God's going to let me get away with it. I'm going to
yeah,
get some mercy here.
rather
I need
and again
some grace.
that's the view that karma is some chalkboard in the sky watching you, rather than simply put that there is cause and effect, and whatever is done will have an effect inevitably. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So, um, basically, now that means that ordinary right view is also a concept. And that is basically, we can say that, oh, no, you can't get away with it
Mhm.
because there is this karma thing going on with karma vipaka, which means retribution or the results of your actions, or there is the fruit of your actions. Uh, so you have this basic war within society between those who are trying to get away with it so they can get what they want, and those the ones who become authoritarian say, no, we're going to stop you from getting what you want,
Mhm.
and we're going to make rules, and we're going to hire armies, and we're going to
Make
get a
build
police
prisons and
force, and right, we're going to build prisons. And if that doesn't stop you from doing what you want to do and do what we want you to do, then we're going to hire a priest. And so you have one group. Basically, you can say it's the adults in the room, or not the adults, but the parents in the room that are trying to force the kids to do the right thing. Where the kids don't want to do the right thing according to what the parents want, they're wanting to follow their greed or to follow their heart. Okay. And so then you could say that noble right view or the supramundane right view would be then the real adult in the room. And in this case, it's not a world view. In this case, we change it from a noun into a verb. It's not a right area view or sama area ditti, actually is a verb to look, to investigate, to examine, not to hold a position or hold a view, but to view, to look, to investigate, to see what's going on right now. That's what right noble view is all about.
So you're saying to kind of be constantly evaluating or penetrating
Right.
moments. Okay.
That as soon as you come to a
Would
conclusion, we generally stop investigating and we hold that conclusion while circumstances change, and which means that now we're
yeah,
based upon old, rotten information
yeah,
that
and
things situation have changed.
and you're viewing everything through a lens that was from the past rather than constantly, basically, rather than seeing, constantly seeing.
Hmm.
Would you say there's also an element of, so you have the normal right view or the relative right view, but then a more if you begin to perceive elements of beyond self, no self, right, and interdependence and this kind of greater scale beyond the individual I, would that then be more of a right view?
Well, let's begin to talk about that a little bit later in the sense of what is self and not self. Believe me, Western Buddhism, self and not self, is highly overrated.
Mhm.
It's way too much
I,
of a big issue.
like without
There's
trying to go too
basically
far
nothing
ahead.
to it. But in fact, we can break it back down to the point of a self is that which will not and cannot change because of fear.
What I was
And
meaning by
no
that.
self, and no self is that there is no self, which means there is no limit to changing, that
So
one
so what
can change.
what I meant by the self was more so I can function in the belief that I'm this guy with a green shirt on and a hat, and where
You can
but if I
function
realize
without believing that.
but if I begin to realize that I'm an aspect of the cosmos, basically, right, and this body will pass away, and the liquid in my blood will kind of one day
Ah,
be in a rib,
but the
all
way that
these.
we're looking at this in the sense of looking at it is that that is something that you can look at and see. But when you think of yourself, that's a concept
Sure.
and it's rigid, it's fixed. But viewing, you can see that no, everything really is fluid in this present
Yes,
moment. That's
yes,
actually the noble view
yes,
is to
that
watch the fluidity of what's really changing right now.
that's what I meant. That's what I meant. And if you perceiving the world through that fluidity, right, then that would be a correct view of
Well,
yes.
no, that would be a correct observation.
Okay. Okay.
And
All right.
so that's the whole idea is that we have to take it out of the conceptualized noun into the verb of looking. Keep
Yes.
looking. Okay. Now, here's the question. When do we look? The answer is when we remember to look.
Sure.
When we remember to look, this is the relationship between sati and ditti, that we remember to look. We remember to wake up to look, which means something that we've got to do in the here now. Conceptualization, something that's come from the past, and when we're repeating that conceptualization, we're in the past.
Yeah.
But when we stop conceptualizing and think we know what it is and actually look at it, we have to remember to do that. We have to remember to stop thinking about it and start looking at it instead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And that when we directly look at it, we can look at it with a discerning eye in the sense of is this correct or is this not correct? Or is this useful, valuable, and wholesome? Or is it just more junk? This is the discernment then that the Buddha talks about in the sense of right noble effort, to take the effort to throw the unwholesome thoughts out of the mind in this moment, this thought, and to replace it with wholesome thoughts right here in this moment. So this is what the Eightfold Noble Path is all about, and it starts off the sutta starts off by the Buddha saying that I will teach you right unification of mind with its supports and features.
I
So
love
right
that.
now we're talking about the supports.
And we're talking about totality too, unification, wholeness.
Well, the unification of one's mind means that we're no longer a crowd.
Yeah,
How can we be a crowd? Well, if I'm lying to myself, I'm a crowd. I'm the truth and the lie. All right. If I'm in doubt, is it this, is it that, then whatever this might be or that might be, I become that. There's also generally an internal dialogue that is going in the sense of this is the rule. And then the statement is said, this is the rule. And then the answer that I don't want to do that right now. And this is normally between the parent and the child. So the parent is out there, or the right noble view, excuse me, the right ordinary view is this is the rule.
yeah,
Okay. And that the child is then the wrong view of I don't want to do your rule.
yeah.
Okay.
And they're
So
reactionary
it,
to each other.
here's an example of that then. Goenka says that when to do anapanasati, you watch the breath. You watch the in breath, then you watch the out breath. And then he says, and then if the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again. But the Western mind's not going to do that. That when the Western mind recognizes that the mind wanders away, that parent ego state's going to come up and says, you did wrong. You
Sure.
should have been watching your breath. Why weren't you doing what you were told to do?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the answer to that is bad feeling. And we're just doing the same old thing that we've always been doing. Okay, the right thing to do is to wake up and say, "Hey, I left the breath. Never mind. Start again. I can handle this."
Mhm.
And so we start back into the wholesome, but very few of us do that. We will go from one unwholesome thought to another wholesome thought, or sometimes we go from a wholesome thought into an unwholesome thought about the wholesome thought.
Yeah. And that sounds so simple, um, almost childlike. Simply all you're saying is don't condemn the mind for losing itself.
Right.
But
Don't be
but that
critical of yourself, be nurturing.
but that simple action echoes like all karma and slowly builds to where
Well,
it,
it
it,
didn't
it,
slowly
it almost
build, it just repeated over and
yeah,
over again.
well, and it
Okay.
almost it almost comes back to the idea of the Sangha that you we began this whole conversation talking about, where the rehabilitation of a monk is done in the mirror and not by throwing one under the bus. And if we can't do that to ourselves as well, to
Hmm.
be a brother to the self, um, yeah,
Right. We have to nurture each other. That's what Sangha is all about, is nurturing ourselves. Here's actually a funny kind of example about that. That when Western teenagers, or let us say you've got one group of teenagers at 4, 5, or 6 or 7 mixed sects in Thailand and again in America. And each group is just going down the street, having fun, doing whatever. And then in each group, one of them slips down and falls. The Westerners will go, "Oh, are you hurt?" Or they make some sort of derisive laughter about it, like you're an idiot, you can't walk. Okay. The Thais, when someone slips and falls, everybody will laugh, including the guy who fell down. It's a great big joke. Never mind, it's okay. There's no problem here. So, what for the Western group is going to be a problem, the Thai kids don't see it as a problem at all.
mhm,
All right. So we can actually begin to recognize that, oh, we have a choice as to is this a
yeah.
problem or is it not?
And
There's
if
no
we
problem
don't
here. Just because the mind wandered away from the breath, that's no problem. That's what minds do.
and if we don't create the problem's not there. At
There's
least
no,
that problem. At least
they
that
never did.
problem.
Right. They did. Problems don't exist.
Yeah.
What exists is the creation of a problem inside one's mind. When someone creates the problem, then there's a problem.
I would say the problems that do exist would be where you are in disharmony with the Dhamma. But like you
Mm.
say, these extra sufferings are not real. That's the creation of the
Ah, that's because we're not doing our duty to the Dhamma that we wind up in suffering.
yeah.
The duty to the Dhamma is to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go back to the breath.
That's a beautiful
and
point. And so even that, okay, sure.
And so when we begin to practice these three things over and over and over again, which is to wake up and take a look at what you're doing and then make a change to that. We do that over and over and over again, but that right effort is to make a change and to come out of whatever we're in and come back to nothing much at all. Then the fourth aspect of the Eightfold Noble Path kicks in, and this is called Samma Sankappa, which has to do then with the right attitude of, I can do this. And then there comes a point, in fact, the very first step of the Noble Path is when the student has so much confidence that he knows that no matter what hindrances, what obstructions, or whatever events come into this present moment, he can handle it. He's got confidence. Now, in our language, we would call it self-confidence. And then the Buddhists will get all hair on fire about the word self, when in fact that's not an issue. Okay, but in fact we can say that yes, you do want to build self-confidence because self-confidence is not selfish.
Sure, no, sure.
Okay, that incompetence is really selfish. Okay, to be in a victim state and being incompetent is a very selfish place to be.
Yes. And it
And
causes
it's a
harm.
dangerous place, and it causes yourself harm and other people's harm. But when you are, in fact, on top of your own world,
When you
then there's no
function,
problem.
when you
Then you can
function.
function.
Yeah, yeah.
A student once said this. They said that everyone is an emperor of their own pile of dirt. Imagine that. Every one of us is an emperor of our own pile of dirt. The question is, are you going to be buried under your pile of dirt? Are you going to be madly scrambling, trying to get out of your pile of dirt, which is the meditator? Or are you just going to sit on top of your world? Your choice. Many people choose to be buried under the world. Oh, poor me. Oh, I've got so much work to do. Oh, I'm a busy businessman, that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And then those that are madly scrambling, trying to get out, get some air. But then all of this is just attitude. We can, in fact, just take on the attitude. We don't actually have to climb out of anything. We can stop thinking that we've got to climb out of something because you're already on top of your world. All you have to do is just see that.
And again, this goes back to Dogen saying, you are already the Buddha. You just have to remember
exactly. That's a very important Zen teaching, that why strive for anything? This is Zazen. This is just sitting. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah. But I guess that striving, appropriate striving is taking
is a bad translation.
But it's taking that.
Use this, and striving is intense for a short period of time. Look at the word instead as persistence, easy persistence.
Sure.
You don't have to strive at all. We just sustain and keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back. Why? Because the old habits of the mind are very slow to change. But if you keep coming back and keep coming back and keep persisting, then it will change. If you strive, then you'll give up in failure and get nowhere.
And you even, if you frantically strive against something, you almost reinforce what it's Mara. It's Buddha and Mara, right? Buddha's confrontation with Mara was not the battle against nor running from, but simply the presence.
Recognition, right. Yeah. Aha, I see you, Mara. And what he's doing is he's recognizing the Mara, or the unwholesome thoughts in his own mind.
Yes, but that he no longer needed to tame the flesh in asceticism to kind of surpass it. That those things could be, and without responding to them, they're no longer monsters. They simply the arrows become flowers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in that regard, then our fear, the negative feelings, no longer are monsters when we make friends with them.
Yes. I've just begun that in my practice in the last 5, 6 months, and it has been revolutionary. It changed
Hmm.
quite a lot. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, this is the way that we practice is that we make a change from the way that we've been doing it out of the unwholesome. And the skill is developing is to how to look, how to see, and how to determine what's wholesome and what's not wholesome. And so this is something that many students will ask, well, how do I know the distinction between what is wholesome and what is not wholesome? That's the job of insight for each individual student to keep looking and keep investigating and keep examining until they begin to see what is unwholesome that they can throw out. And every
amen.
time they see something that's unwholesome, they can throw that out. And whatever they've got left is now ready for more evaluation, more
Yeah.
investigation. And
And, and and
so,
that and that requires you to be the light upon yourself, to really take on that mantle of not just abdicating responsibility, but saying, okay, I will look, I will be conscious, I will practice.
mhm.
Yeah,
And I will enjoy what I see
yeah, yeah. Doing it with joy.
rather than being miserable with it. Yes, this is the whole point about the gladdening the mind or the wholesome, that we can't just see it
Yeah.
what it
I,
is. That's not enough. We've got to throw it out and put something in the mind instead, which is much better than that.
hmm. Now,
But
how do
that
how do
was
you recommend changing out qualities of mind? Because you
but
can't
you
force
just
against them, you can't push them out. But what is the
yes, you can. Yes, you can. Exactly so. And it takes right effort to do that. That in the beginning we have to put a lot of effort in it. But as we get, let us say, as several factors come together, and the factors that we're talking about is how much enthusiasm do you have? How much skill have of putting in right effort do you have? And also what kind of attitude that you have. And so attitude and the skill of right effort and enthusiasm begin to run and circle around each other to make the right effort become actually energizing,
Mhm.
that we just naturally, as soon as we remember to feel good, we just take a deep breath and feel good. We don't have to work at it at all. But in the beginning, we have to actually work at it because we're so much in the habit of feeling bad. We're so much in the habit of having uh, critical thoughts.
Yeah.
Critical thoughts are judgment thoughts, thoughts of this is good and this is greater and this is worse, and comparisons. And nurturing is nurturing in the sense of whatever that little young baby is doing, that's fine. It's absolutely okay. What's happening right now is absolutely okay. This is good enough. This is the kind of behavior, attitude that we need to gain rather than hating what our thoughts are. We can say, aha, I see you, and then change it.
Mhm.
So we
So
become
simply by
friendly
not
to the
by not
inside.
fighting. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm. By stop fighting with our thoughts and start intentionally having nurturing thoughts instead,
yeah.
to nurture ourselves. Well, I'm glad I thought of that. Or another one was, well, I'm glad I don't have to think about her anymore. Imagine that you're having, let us say that the story is that the guy walks into the meditation hall at the meditation hour and sits down with everybody else, but he's just come out of an argument with his girlfriend. And so there he sits in meditation, but he's going to have the girlfriend on his mind. He's going to keep that argument going. He's going to think about things that he's going to say to her, and he's going to think about finishing that argument so that he wins.
Sure.
But all of the input that he's having and all the things that he can think of it's got nothing to do with what she might say. And so he goes to her to finish the argument. He's got winning points, and she doesn't even know what she's going to say back to him, and she says something back that just throws a big monkey wrench into his plans for winning that argument. And so now he goes back into the meditation hall again. If he had gone into that meditation hall with the idea of thinking about the girlfriend, he could have changed those thoughts to, well, I don't have to argue with her. She's a good friend of mine. It doesn't matter who wins that argument. What's important is our relationship is good. Let me have good, wholesome, happy thoughts about her instead of having angry, winning thoughts about her. Okay, so this is the way that we can see it, that a lot of people say, well, why are you thinking about the girl at all in meditation? Shouldn't you be meditating? Yes, but you don't have the skill of no mind yet. You're going to have thoughts. The question is, are you going to be able to choose what kind of thoughts you're going to have? Are you going to have loving, wholesome, happy thoughts of friendship and community? Are you going to have thoughts of winning an argument? So we begin to change the way we think. Here's another example, a very clear example, that you're driving down the road and all of a sudden it's evening time and you can see the lights, red and blue, flashing all inside your car while you hear the siren sound, and you know immediately that you're being pulled over by a cop. How do you feel?
Terrified.
Okay. So when the cop comes up to the window and tells you to roll your window down, how do you feel?
Nervous.
All right, okay. And so that cop's going to see that nervousness,
Mhm.
and he'll put his hand on his gun. And that really terrifies you, and so you start acting really stupidly, and he pulls the gun out and shoots you. How many times has that happened? So,
Sure.
exactly. People get busted because they don't know how to be in the moment.
Sure. Sure.
That if you could take a deep breath while that cop is coming back and saying, hey, I can handle this, cop, there's absolutely no problem here. In fact, I can do this. And so when the window rolls down, hello, officer, I'm so glad to see you. I've heard so much good stuff about your police force. You're out here on duty, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you very much. What can I do for you tonight, officer? Now, if you approach him in a very happy way, whatever happens, he's probably not going to have any trouble with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's likely he won't even give you a ticket. But if you resist him in any way, he might pull you out of the car and have you on the ground handcuffing you.
Mhm.
All right. And it's all based upon your own attitude. So when you recognize that, wait a minute, we can control our environment with our attitude about things if we can remember, if we can wake up, when we can choose, I'm going to deal with this in a wholesome way, rather than choosing to deal with it the way that we feel. In that case, being terrified of the cop means that your terror is going to drive your behavior. It's going to be in charge, and you're going to be ignorantly allowing your terror to be in charge when you need your adult instead.
Yeah.
You do not need a terrified child dealing with a big, tough cop parent kind of thing.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. That in
Sure.
fact, when cops pull someone over, as that window rolls down, somehow or another, diapers are created. They get that young.
Sure. Sure.
So, this is the real teaching of the Eightfold Noble Path is that we need to have that right unification, right organization of the mind. And the way that we get that is by remembering to look at what's going on and to change it from unhappy into happy with now the new fine attitude of, I can do this. I'm
Mhm.
a winner here. I'm the boss. I'm in charge of this situation, and I can deal with it easily. That's the winner's attitude. In fact, this is what we talk about in the sense of the Buddha was known as a lion.
Yeah.
He was in charge of his life. Okay. So you become a lion. You become a Dhamma lion. That's your duty, is to lion up,
I love
get
that. Yeah.
strong, get tough, get where you know that you
Yeah.
can handle anything,
Yeah.
because all you're really ever needing to handle is wholesome anyway. I mean, it's
And,
really dead easy to handle only wholesome. And so if you've got only wholesome, your life is really easy.
and to reclaim that is to come back to life, basically.
And to them coming back to
be
life, to
living
coming
again.
back to that, living that life of the sacred animal.
Yeah, yeah. I
Really
love
alive.
this. I am falling asleep a little bit. It's 11 o'clock here. Uh, this has been wonderful. Could we speak again?
Oh, absolutely. I actually expect that. I don't like one-time callers
No,
because
yeah,
they're
yeah,
not
yeah.
going to get any Dhamma. This stuff has to be rubbed in and
No, I
rubbed
mean,
in and rubbed in over and over and over again. uh, with like Sangha. That's what
sure,
Sangha
sure.
is all about, is getting into a healthy environment and letting that environment do its work for you.
I mean, I will say that throughout this conversation, I felt in my chest, in my heart, like joy and gratitude. And so I would love to talk again, Dhammarato.
All right. Well, let's plan on you calling about once a week or so.
That sounds great. That sounds great.
And I also invite you to get on the Sangha calls. We have one on
Okay.
Friday evening, that would be 9 o'clock Eastern time
Is
on
it
Friday. It's a Skype, on Skype.
the same Skype right now?
Well, it's search for the Sangha US. The
I'll
word is
well,
Sangha, Sangha, and you can find that in Skype because
okay,
they're groups. We have groups open.
okay, okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, I will do that. I'll send you an email, and if you could send me the name to look for, could you do that, or could you, in the chat maybe?
Actually, I'll just send it to you in chat in
Yeah,
after
perfect,
we
perfect.
finish, because
Okay,
it's
okay.
all right. Well, David, it's really good to meet you. I've
It's
really enjoyed our conversation.
it's been a pleasure, honestly. I'm very grateful. Thank you. Yeah,
Okay. We'll see you again soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Dhammarato.
Okay.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye.